All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open a case file that has been puzzling and, frankly, horrifying people for well over a century. Now, this is a story that's presented not as fiction, but as a factual account of a scientific experiment that went terribly, terribly wrong. So let's dive right into this bizarre and unsettling record from the works of Edgar Allan Poe.
So right at the heart of this whole thing is this terrifying question. I mean, we all have a fear of death, right? But what if the alternative, the attempt to actually stop it, created something so monstrous that death itself would seem like a blessing? That is the grim question we are about to confront.
So our whole account comes from this narrator, right? A guy who is just completely fascinated with the science of mesmerism, which, we'd probably call hypnotism today. For 3 years, he was obsessed with it, and it suddenly occurred to him that science had made this huge, unexplainable oversight.
He boiled it all down to 3 core questions. First, could a person on the absolute brink of death, what the doctors at the time called in articulo mortis, the very point of dying, could they even be mesmerized? Second, would their dying state make them more susceptible or less? And third, and this is the real kicker, could the actual process of dying be stopped, even for a little while, by mesmerism? That last question, as he put it, had immensely important consequences.
Okay, so to answer these questions, he couldn't just grab anybody. He needed a very, very specific type of person. Somebody whose death was a sure thing, predictable, and, crucially, who would actually agree to such a wild experiment. And he found that person in his friend, Monsieur Valdemar.
And let me tell you, when you look at the medical facts of the case, Valdemar was a goner. There was no question about it. His doctors had diagnosed him with advanced phthisis, which is what they called tuberculosis back then. His left lung was basically hardening, totally useless, and his right lung was just a mess of tubercles. It was starting to ossify and was even stuck to his ribs. The prognosis? It was ironclad. He would be dead within a day, tops.
And then, the call came. The narrator gets this note, sent directly from Valdemar himself, confirming he was ready to go ahead with it and that the end was near. The window for the experiment was officially open, but it was closing fast. The clock was ticking.
So the narrator rushes over and finds Valdemar fading, and fading fast, though his mind was still totally clear. He had 2 physicians and a medical student there as witnesses, and he got ready to begin. He just knew he didn't have a single moment to waste.
The experiment kicks off right at 8 p.m., and you can just feel the tension building through the night. For 2 hours, not a whole lot happens. By 10 p.m., the doctors confirm it. Valdemar is in his final death throes. But then, just 5 minutes before midnight, the narrator sees it. That glassy, vacant look in the eye is replaced by that telltale sign of a mesmeric trance. By midnight, against all odds, he'd done it.
So here's the crazy part. The doctors examined Valdemar and confirmed, yep, he's in a perfect mesmeric trance. His limbs were as rigid and cold as marble. His pulse was gone. His breathing was so faint you could only detect it with a mirror. For all intents and purposes, he had every single sign of being dead. But something was different.
The narrator decides to risk it, to hazard a question. Valdemar, he asks, are you asleep? And after a few attempts, a tremor runs through Valdemar's lips. And in this whisper you can barely hear, these words come out. He was asleep. And he was begging to be allowed to die. Just like that, in that state.
Now, the doctors, they all agreed to leave him be. They figured, this state would last a few hours at most. But it didn't. This is where the story goes from weird science to something else entirely. Because Valdemar stayed just like that, suspended between life and death for 7, unbelievable, months.
And the whole time he had this ghastly, corpse-like look. His jaw was hanging open, his tongue was swollen and black. Just a horrible sight. Then, one day, as the observers were questioning if he was really even still under the influence, they saw this strong, vibrating motion in his tongue. And from those motionless jaws, a voice came out, a sound the narrator could barely describe, calling it harsh, broken, hollow, and even gelatinous.
And that voice? It was a direct answer to the last question the narrator had asked him, do you still sleep? And this answer is the central horror of the entire case. It's a statement that just shatters reality for everyone in that room. The medical student? Yeah, he fainted, dropped right to the floor.
So just let that sink in for a second. For 7 months, he was a corpse that could speak. That was the unbelievable reality these men had to deal with every single day.
So after this almost unbelievable stretch of time, the narrator and the doctors, They just couldn't take it anymore. They decided they had to end it. They resolved to try and wake him up, a decision that, as the narrator notes, apparently caused a massive public uproar. The narrator starts making the usual passes to try and reverse the trance, but at first, nothing, no effect at all. So finally, he just asks him a direct question. He asks the subject to explain his feelings, or what he wants. And that question, well, that's what triggered the catastrophic end.
Instantly, that same hideous voice breaks out, but this time, it's a shriek, a desperate, impossible plea. Think about that. The thing on the bed is begging to be woken up because, as it screams again, it's already dead. The sheer terror in that voice must have been absolute.
The narrator is, completely unnerved by this point, and he starts frantically trying to reverse the passes, just desperate to awaken him. And as he's doing this, amid these awful shrieks of dead, dead, bursting from the man's tongue, the entire frame of M. Valdemar just dissolved. In less than a minute, his body shrunk, crumbled, and literally rotted away, leaving only what the witnesses could describe as a nearly liquid mass of loathsome, of detestable putridity.
And that's where the case file ends. The narrator gives you the facts, just as he understood them. But the final question that hangs in the air for us, did a scientific process really put death on pause for 7 months, only to have it all come crashing down in a single minute? Or did this experiment tear a hole in the fabric of reality and unleash a horror that science simply has no name for? Well, that's for you to decide.